You know that feeling? When you're right on the edge of figuring something out, something really deep, but it just slips away, like trying to remember a dream.
Oh, absolutely. That feeling of something being just, yeah, just out of reach.
Exactly. Well, that's kind of the space we're stepping into today.
And instead of just talking about it in the abstract, we've got some really fascinating material here, actual documents you've shared that give us a window into the artist Bob Camblin.
Right. We've got stuff from his exhibitions back in 1988, and also this amazing collection of his own notes, his quotes, little thoughts he jotted down over time.
It feels a bit like being detectives, doesn't it? Piecing together these fragments to get a sense of the man, his art, his thinking.
Yeah, it does. So, our mission, let's call it, for this deep dive is to try and grasp his art practice, his views on art, on life, and especially what was going on for him around 1988. That seems like a pretty key year.
It really does seem like a moment of transition.
Okay, so let's start with those 88 exhibitions. He seemed, well, pretty busy on the Houston scene then. First up, there's a show at the Nave Museum in Victoria, Texas, May, June-ish. It was Robert Morris Bob Camblin paintings, drawings.
Right, and he had quite a few pieces in that one.
11 works listed,
Mhm.
and the titles are really something. You've got Electric Edge Working Pose, then things like Rainbow Pie and Backyard Bash. Quite a range.
Yeah, it's quite a mix. And what's really interesting is how the local painter, the Victoria Advocate, picked up on the reaction.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Clara Kilgore, who was the Museum Association's director, she mentioned that young people were especially drawn to his work. Even if they couldn't quite say why,
Ah,
she actually used the phrase artistic magic. What do you think she meant by that? Is there anything in the descriptions that hints at why it might hit people, maybe especially younger people, in that sort of visceral way?
that's a good question. The article does describe his work using words like ironic, satirical, and at all times mystical. That's quite a powerful mix right there.
It really is. Mystical and satirical.
And it talks specifically about his backyard watercolors, saying they could seem threatening when you look closely, but they still had humor in them.
That duality again, that seemed to pop up a lot with Gamblin. The article even points to one specific piece, camping in the backyard,
Right, I saw that.
describing it as this torturous hell of body-shaped tree limbs and sexual symbols. But then it explicitly says it doesn't have that moralizing feel you'd get from, say, Bosch.
No preaching, just showing.
Exactly. And then, almost to undercut the horror, there's this, like, comical pumpkin face with its tongue out.
Yeah, it kind of pulls the rug out from under you, doesn't it?
It totally does. It's like he's saying, yeah, it's dark, but hey, don't take it too seriously.
Yeah.
And the article also makes a point of praising his technical skill, his superior technical skills.
Which is interesting, especially with watercolors, right? Because you think of watercolor as maybe softer, but he's getting this threatening feel.
Precisely. He must have been manipulating the medium, maybe with layering or color choices or distorting things, to get that effect. It wasn't accidental. That subversion itself could be part of the irony we were talking about.
Using his skill to unsettle you, but with a wink, maybe? Okay, so then later in the summer, July to September, he's at another show. This one's handmade paper at Little Egypt Enterprises in Houston.
Mm-hmm. Alongside Eric Avery and Jack Boynton, focusing specifically on handmade paper as a medium.
Yeah, that focus seems significant. And it looks like that show got some regular press.
It did, yeah. The Texan newspaper ran notices for it over several weeks. So people in the Houston art scene were definitely aware of him, engaging with his work.
Then later in the year, November into '89, there's this toy show at Transco Gallery.
A recreation of an earlier show, apparently.
Yeah, and he did the invitation drawing and made another toy for it. It adds this, I don't know, playful layer to what he was doing, maybe pushing back against purely serious art.
Could be. And then almost right after that, end of November, something quite different happens.
The auction.
Yeah, Bob Camblin. Artists Anonymous Last Daisy Silent Auction, held right in his studio. The description says it's an exhibition space for selling his art, but that title, Last Daisy,
Ooh, yeah. Given what happens next, that feels really loaded.
extremely loaded.
Yeah.
Because the documents show that pretty much immediately after this period of activity, he leaves Houston.
Right, it sounds like quite the exit. Flies to San Francisco with Nancy Giordano. Then they drive up through Washington, Orcas Islands over to Victoria in Canada.
And eventually finds a place to house sit way down in Yachets, Oregon. It doesn't sound like a casual trip.
No, it sounds like a very definite choice. A break.
Absolutely. Like a conscious decision to disconnect, maybe find something new. And there's that article from Artley713, also from '88, where Camblin himself talks about vanishing from Houston after 20 years there.
Vanishing. Wow, that's a strong word. 20 years is a long time.
It's a huge shift. You have to wonder what was driving that. I mean, when you think about making big life changes yourself, there's usually a buildup, right? What might have been pushing him towards such a drastic move?
It really makes you speculate, doesn't it? Especially with all this activity right beforehand. We also see mentions of other undated shows, the watercolors at Rice University, a show at Graham Gallery, plus him still working on his Oxfording Picture One etching. So he was still producing, still engaged, right up until he left.
Which makes the suddenness of the departure even more striking.
Okay, so we got this picture. Active artist, recognized in Houston, technically skilled, exploring these themes of satire, mysticism, maybe playfulness, but also making this decisive break.
A real turning point.
So now let's turn to his own words, these quotes and observations you mentioned. This feels like where we might get closer to his inner world, maybe understand that vanishing act a bit better.
I think so. These fragments, they offer these really personal glimpses into how he saw things. Like, take this one. Fortunately, some things remain forever, or another 10 years perhaps.
Huh. Yeah, there's that sort of wryness, but also a real sense of impermanence.
Exactly. Transience. It connects to that note about the cottonwood trees being gone, now with them gone, look. The absence suddenly forces you to see.
And thinking about him leaving Houston after 20 years, that idea of things not being forever must have been on his mind.
It certainly resonates, doesn't it? It feels like it could be part of the motivation, recognizing that this chapter, this place, wasn't permanent.
And that feeling of time passing, it's so strong in that other quote. As they approached, the memory of songs and music stopped. Sad how we all aged at that moment in time. Salt Air, summer, 1967. Just boom, you feel the weight of that moment.
It's incredibly evocative. He also really dives into ideas about knowing, about understanding the world.
Like the Atom and Magic quote.
Yes. Look into the atom, you get what you need. Look into magic, and you get what you need. Philosophy and art are in both. He's collapsing these categories we usually keep separate: science, magic, art, philosophy.
He sees them as connected paths to, well, to what you need.
Right. And then he talks about wanting this perfectly average view, hoping for this bright gray where maybe science and magic meet.
A kind of ultimate balance. Not choosing one side, but finding the synthesis.
That search for balance seems key. It shows up again when he talks about intuition, the sixth sense being, without a doubt, senza dubio. That's certainty.
But then he immediately contrasts it almost with that feeling of being torn. Bright day and I soar, how cruel that my soul is attached to this earth, and yet that pull between the spiritual and the physical.
It's very human tension, isn't it? And he seems very grounded in self-honesty. I cannot tell a lie to myself for very long.
Followed right away by, find something in nature that completes you and then surrender. Nature again, it seems foundational for him.
It really does. And there's that longer piece where he muses on light, evolution, balance, patience, freedom, silence. It's almost like a personal manifesto.
And that line tucked in there, true love moves to indifference to protect itself. Wow, that's complex, a bit bracing.
It hints at some hard-won insights about relationships, maybe about protecting oneself emotionally.
He also finds value in unexpected places. Sublime in the ridiculous. Look for the forgotten, but become what you are. Less only is. It's like an embrace of simplicity, of finding the profound and the overlooked.
And his view on art itself seems to be shifting, evolving, from art for art's sake to something more personal, more essential. Art for life's sake, or art for my sake, or art for survival's sake.
Survival's sake, that feels intense. Like art isn't just decoration, it's necessary.
Necessary for him, perhaps. Which connects to his idea about getting off the mental treadmill, step off the train of thought, to find the power that is no power, to do the work that is not work, to laugh the true laugh. Bending is not bowing.
It's about breaking patterns, isn't it? Finding a different way of being, of creating maybe, getting beyond just thinking all the time.
Yes, and he explicitly contrasts thinking and acting.
Yeah.
When you think, don't act. When you act, don't think. Like, be fully present in whichever mode you're in.
Don't let the analysis paralyze the action, or the action preclude reflection later.
Makes sense. And then there's that little story, the anecdote about the guy talking about changing the world.
Oh, yeah, and then he just pays 21 cents for his coffee and leaves.
Huh. It's such a perfect wry observation on the gap between big talk and, well, everyday reality.
It really grounds things. And speaking of grounding, his connection to nature feels so direct, so sensory.
Totally. The cosmos waves as me with tree leaves, sun-heated air moves across the electrons of my skin. You can almost feel it.
And that on the tower sequence, breaking down, watching the weather into acts like a play. Clouds, wind, lightning. It's such an artist's way of processing an experience.
Frame by frame, almost.
Yeah.
And those little haiku-like observations that are scattered through his notes,
The willows in the rain, the slow walker affecting the wind.
they show this incredibly fine-tuned awareness, these little moments of noticing.
He also has some really sharp thoughts on arguing, on communication.
Much better than arguing is to look at my watercolor palette.
Yeah.
Like, the visual speaks more directly for him sometimes.
Maybe less room for misunderstanding than words. And his advice on ending arguments, with a pessimist, you say, "You're absolutely right."
Huh. And with an optimist, you say, it's a banana. It's funny, but it also suggests some arguments are just pointless. You can't really win them in a meaningful way.
Yeah, you just end them. And that image of the searcher, the gate stays open, the fence is broken, he keeps searching, but does not know the size of his quarry. Yet he has faith.
That feels very much like the artistic or spiritual quest, doesn't it?
Mhm.
Searching without knowing exactly what for, but trusting the process. Looking everywhere, wishing you could see all around at once.
That desire for total perspective. And
Yeah.
his thoughts on change, revolution versus evolution.
Right. Revolution leads to changes. But evolution is change. He seems to favor the deeper, more integrated understanding that comes with evolution.
Aiming for balance in our minds, individually first, maybe collectively later. It sounds patient.
Patient but hopeful. And then just that simple punch-of-the-gut line, you never miss the water until the wells run dry. Universal truth right there.
Oh, man, absolutely. We could spend hours just on these quotes, couldn't we?
Easily. Each one opens up another little pathway into his thinking. He talks about his teaching at Rice with that sort of self-deprecating humor.
Assuming, giving in, then teaching. Yeah.
And that metaphor for the ego. Goldfish's shit.
Yeah.
Folded under the waving tail.
It's so blunt, but you immediately get the picture. This hidden, maybe unacknowledged baggage we carry around.
And he's pulling in ideas from everywhere.
Yeah.
Zen, magic, questioning how we see, critiquing the art world, the critics.
Keeps coming back to individual experience, though, and how hard it is to truly communicate that. The limits of language, maybe.
Definitely. And thinking about time, perspective, the search for meaning. It's all woven through these notes. I love his take on mistakes, too.
Oh, yeah, that was great. There are no mistakes. You're doing the best you can.
And mistakes are nature's way of telling you to trust your instincts, or the next mistake could be really bad. It's reframing mistakes not as failures, but as feedback. Course correction.
Trust your gut. He also turns that old saying, "Pride goeth before a fall," on its head, looking at cause and effect going both ways. He likes to twist things around, look from different angles.
Like the hologram analogy. That's a brilliant way to think about perspective.
Explain that one again.
Well, the idea is that each piece of a hologram contains some information, but the whole right.
Sure.
But you only see the full 3D image when it's all integrated. He seems to be saying our individual viewpoints are like those pieces.
Ah, so we each have a fragment of the truth.
Exactly. And the more we can somehow bring those perspectives together, the clearer it becomes. It's a call for collective understanding, maybe.
That ties into his bigger vision of humanity as these holograms living in past, present, and future all at once, all trying to figure out how it works, barking and singing with her own limited instruments, as he puts it.
It's a beautiful, complex image. And he keeps using these nature analogies, like the hawk versus the snake, different ways of navigating life, the observer versus the patient waiter.
Always returning to these cycles, too, beginning, ending, next step, linked to past and future. It feels very organic.
Very process-oriented. Even the little aside about Louis Sullivan, the architect, ending up in a broom closet,
Yeah.
it hints at the challenges of staying true to your vision.
He doesn't shy away from difficulty. He mentions futility, provocation, but always emphasizes being free. And that phoenix frozen in a salty shell image. Wow.
So much potential, but constrained, right? Unable to break free. And his thoughts on living versus the residue left behind the empty ribcage full of sand, it really makes you think about what matters.
He's clearly read widely, too. He weaves in quotes from Alan Watts, William James, Sartre, Zen Proverbs, Bergson, Teilhard de Chardin.
Jung, Fowles, Dostoevsky, Salinger, Updike. The list goes on. He's putting his own thoughts in conversation with all these other thinkers. It shows a mind constantly processing, connecting ideas.
And then he formulates his own concepts, like the ecology of art.
Yeah, urging artists to do your own thing, not just for themselves, but for the balance of nature. Like, artistic diversity is crucial for a healthy cultural ecosystem.
It's a fascinating idea that your unique expression actually contributes to the whole, even if it seems isolated. Authenticity is an ecological principle.
Right. And that final image you mentioned, drawing on a frosted window,
Yeah.
capturing something true, knowing it's fleeting, that the next image will wipe it away.
That feels like a perfect metaphor for what he was trying to do, maybe, especially grappling with consumer art and wondering if concept was replacing skill or substance.
It really encapsulates that sense of trying to capture something meaningful in a world where things feel increasingly temporary or superficial.
So, wrapping this up, looking back at Camblin in '88, we see this artist deeply engaged, exhibiting, technically skilled, but also clearly wrestling with big ideas and on the verge of this major life change.
Absolutely. And his writings just open up this incredibly rich inner landscape. You see the humor, the darkness, the mystical alongside the mundane, the pull towards connection, and the need for solitude. It's all in there.
It really is. And for anyone listening who resonates with that feeling, we started with searching for understanding, for those aha moments. Camlin's journey, his words, they don't give easy answers, do they?
Not at all. But they offer so much to chew on, so many different angles. His way of looking at things is complex, sometimes contradictory, but always thought-provoking.
Which leads us to a final thought to leave you with. Thinking about Camlin's idea of stepping off the train of thought, where might your own thinking patterns be boxing you in? What are the mystic switches, as the article put it, the unexpected connections or insights that resonate in your own life? Inspired perhaps by Camlin's relentless questioning and his unique way of observing the world around him.
It's an invitation, really, to keep looking, keep questioning, just like he did.